Is everybody ready to go? Let me know when you're ready. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Sandy Vastola, and I am the Director of Public Affairs for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department. Tonight, we are going to be providing an update to the April 29th shooting investigation. Speaking for our agency this evening is Chief Johnny Jennings, followed by Deputy Chief Tanya Arrington. Tanya spelled T-O-N-Y-A, Arrington at A-R-R-I-N-G-T-O-N. We will take questions at the conclusion of the press briefing. Please understand we're going to be limited with what we are able to answer because this is still an active and ongoing investigation. So we ask you to please understand that as you ask your questions. Okay? So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief Jennings. Chief.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, everyone, for being here on a Friday evening. April 29th, 2024. It's a date that's going to stay with us forever. It's a date that was historic and a date that we have never seen the likes of such violence towards police officers and loss of life and injury within the city that we live in and within Mecklenburg County. CMPD officers, Officer Joshua Iyer, Deputy U.S. Marshal Tommy Weeks, North Carolina Department of Corrections Officer William Elliott, North Carolina Department of Corrections Officer Sam Peloche. All four were heroes, courageous heroes that day, doing the work to keep our community safe. And we still mourn their loss to this day. We can't also forget CMPD officers Chris Tolley, Michael Gilio, Jack Blowers, Justin Campbell, Tyler Spiegler, Youngmin Kim, and Statesville Police Corporal Casey Hoover, who were all injured during this incident and continue their recovery efforts. So we continue to thank them for their bravery and we lift them up in their recovery as well. Our first responders, a huge thank you to Medic, the Charlotte Fire Department, the Mecklenburg County Sheriff's Office, the North Carolina State Highway Patrol, all the healthcare professionals at Atrium and beyond, and all the agencies who assisted us on that day and continue to assist us. We cannot do the work without each of you. We've received such an outpouring support over the past several weeks from across the country. Support for the fallen officers and their families, support for the wounded, support for those who wear the badge and carry the responsibility to respond in times of crisis. Thank you. Thank you for continuing to show support for all of these heroes and all who continue to do the work. I want to recognize also our crime scene investigators, our lab and technicians, our homicide detectives, and everyone who's been working diligently around the clock, nights and weekends on this investigation. The gravity of that work is not lost on us. Every piece of evidence, every witness, every video, every single detail. This team has carefully and meticulously reviewed every piece of evidence in this case and continue to do so. We've collected more than 1,100 videos to review and nearly 10,000 pieces of evidence in this case. The investigation is still ongoing. It's not complete yet. But we do feel the need to provide you with the latest that we've been able to confirm through this investigation. So joining me today is Deputy Chief Tanya Arrington, who is over our investigative unit, and she's going to share where we are and some critical updates on this investigation, and then we'll take a few questions. Chief Arrington.
Thanks, Chief.
Good evening. Like you said, my name is Tanya Arrington. I appreciate every one of you being here for the update this evening. Note that this is still an ongoing investigation. Like it's been stated before, we may not be able to provide all the details you want, but we'll provide what we can at this particular time. First, we have been able to confirm that there was only one shooter during this incident. We know that early on in the investigation, there were multiple accounts of a potential second shooter. But after a thorough review of all the evidence and interviews, we have determined that there was only one shooter who fired at officers, and he was pronounced deceased on the scene. So what we have here is a rendering of the second floor plan where this incident took place. Just to orient you, the A, Alpha, is the front of the house. B, Bravo, is the left side of the house. C, Charlie, is the back or rear of the house. D, Delta, right side of the house if you're facing it from the street. The shooter was able to move back and forth between three windows. So you can see them highlighted, the Charlie in the yellow, Delta in the yellow. And then eventually he moves to the front window. The suspect told the female occupants to get out or get down before he fired his weapon at officers. He then shot his AR-15 out of the back and side windows, like I mentioned, the Charlie window and the Delta window highlighted in yellow. Then the suspect ended up jumping out of the front window, which is indicated on the layout with the blue circle around it. Because the gunfire was coming from multiple directions, as you can see, we got the Charlie and the Delta window highlighted again from a different vantage point. Shows the two windows the suspect was shooting out of. This may have provided the impression of a second shooter on the scene, but like I said, all evidence shows there was only one shooter during this incident. Evidence indicates that some officers believed additional gunfire came from the home after the suspect was down in the front yard. This investigation has shown that the only shell casings collected at the scene inside the home are consistent with the rifle recovered near the suspect in the front yard where he was pronounced deceased. In a previous briefing, we mentioned that we recovered 2 guns off the suspect, the AR-15 and a handgun. What we can confirm is he only used the AR during this incident. Another note, there were no other firearms located inside the house. Officers were actively engaged with gunfire from the suspect for over 17 minutes. That's an eternity. They were in a gun battle. This leads us to our next development in the case. Our interviews and investigation revealed that an officer observed movement in a second floor window after the suspect jumped from the house and was down in the front yard. As officers were trying to evacuate the wounded from the scene, they utilized suppressive gunfire at 2 targeted locations where the suspect was firing from to facilitate the evacuation of our wounded officers. Based on this evidence, there was no friendly fire in this case. Suppressive gunfire is a tactical maneuver where officers utilize directed gunfire to facilitate the safe evacuation of officers and wounded from the scene without risking further injury. So in this case, officers made a tactical decision to shoot at the second floor windows so that other officers could evacuate the wounded. So as you can see here, it's hard to tell, but the blue arrows kind of indicating that the house sits on an elevated plane. Officer's gunfire was aimed at the second floor windows as indicated by the arrows, so they were shooting in an upward trajectory. They were not shooting in a crossfire situation. It was intentional gunfire in an upward trajectory at the two windows where they were taking fire. From this investigation, we do know that officer suppressive gunfire was intentional and directed at the specific windows outlined in this photo. This is another photo where officers were taking cover behind a tree. That's on the Charlie side. Once again, that's the window where they were shooting in an upward trajectory. We know this was not sympathetic or friendly fire. Sympathetic gunfire is when an officer will be engaged in a lethal threat and begin to fire, and then other officers would react and fire with their weapons without knowing why they were firing. The investigation concluded this was not the case. The investigation has also concluded that no officers were shot or shot at by other officers, which is considered friendly fire or blue on blue. We can confirm that the suspect was responsible for all who were shot in the line of duty that day. So let me paint the picture again. At this time, we have 8 officers that are shot. Other officers are moving in to evacuate the wounded, carefully and cautiously, after shots have been fired from the house. At this point, we have 1 suspect down in the front yard. The house is not being cleared or rendered safe at this time. As a team of officers approached the side of the home to evacuate the wounded, an officer observed movement from the same window where gunfire previously rained down on them. That officer fired 1 round into that window. Officers heard active gunfire, and they made a tactical decision to utilize suppressive gunfire, which was directed at the 2 second-story windows so that officers could evacuate our wounded. So again, at this point in the investigation, it has been determined there was 1 shooter and no friendly fire. This was a rapidly evolving and chaotic scene. Circumstances were changing by the minute. We ask that you continue to respect this process and what our law enforcement community went through that day. It was an unprecedented tragedy for this community, one that will forever be etched in the hearts and minds of our law enforcement as well as our community. We're asking you, all the media, to kindly understand that this investigation is still ongoing. Respect the investigation, all the impact from these events, including the privacy of those who are directly involved, and continuing to heal. We're still coping with this tragedy and healing from it. We're still conducting interviews and going through evidence. We will share more when we have further details. Just to reiterate the magnitude of this investigation, there were 1,128 body-worn cameras, 8,903 images, 65 officer interviews, and 765 pieces of physical evidence to process. Public Affairs will be pushing a press release on this case's developments shortly. So with that, I will open it up for questions.
My first question would like to follow up would be, is any third-party investigation like the FBI or the DOJ involved in this investigation?
No, we are handling the investigation.
Can I ask why they would not be involved with this?
That's kind of one of the understandings that we had was between the SBI and homicide. That was before my time, but my understanding is that we would take these incidents where we had an officer shot in the line of duty.
Chief, just to clarify, he jumped out of a second-story window?
That's correct. So if you look at the alpha, the front side of the house, the blue highlights the window. It was a second-story window, and he came out of that window armed with 2 guns.
Did he fire any shots after getting out of that window?
I don't believe so.
That was after 17 minutes of gunfire?
Right. So the time from the first shot fired by the suspect to the time that he was down in the front yard, that was 17 minutes.
How much longer did gunfire continue after those 17 minutes?
So we estimate that once officers perceived a threat and they laid down suppression fire, that it was less than 2 minutes that they were able to get our wounded evacuated.
So we're talking about, in total, somewhere less than 20, 22 minutes of gunfire?
But less than 19 minutes.
The 2 females that were in the home.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you specify where they were when all this was happening?
I don't have that information. I know that after he told them to get out or get down, that they got down.
Okay. And what happened in those minutes between that before, like what happened with the females from that point on? Can you share any information about that till when he was down? Any additional information?
No additional other than my understanding is that they were hunkered down until he was neutralized in the front yard, and then we started communications with them. Then we were able to get them out safely.
Talk about the test that was done for gun residue and what the results are from that was done on these.
Right. So we did do a gunshot residue test on the females at the scene, and that has been sent to the state, but we are confident that they were not involved in the shooting. Like I said, based on kind of all the evidence that I went over and the fact that there were no other guns found in the house, there's nothing for them to shoot with, right?
Were either of them injured in the shooting?
No.
And are they still cooperating with the investigation?
Yes.
What is expected from the on-call officers that were already on duty once that call came through the scanners or dispatch?
I don't know that there was any expectations. What I can tell you is when something like that happens, we're all going. Whether it was a white shirt, officers in plain clothes, officers in patrol, officers in specialized units, we were all going.
Could you talk a little bit about the damage to the front of the house and at what point that occurred?
Yeah, so, I talked about, the suspect was neutralized. We were able to get the 2 females out safely. At that time, we still didn't know if we had another shooter in the house. So our SWAT team was deployed, and during that time, they were breaching certain areas just to ensure that we weren't going into a house where somebody was waiting to ambush us again. Yes, ma'am.
I apologize for the hard question.
That's okay.
But all of the bullets that either injured or killed the officers were from the AR-15 rifle. Is that what you folks are?
That's what we are confirming, that all of the line of duty deaths did come from the suspect's rifle. Yes, ma'am. I think, go in.
Just to clarify, the suspect, did he get shot at all? Did he receive any wounds prior to him jumping out of the window?
I think it's I don't know like a time frame, but it was kind of all simultaneously. So you've got 8 officers down, you got a suspect coming out of a window armed with 2 guns. So it was probably all simultaneously. Officers observed a threat, and then they fired.
When the suspect jumped out of the window, was he looking to continue shooting or was he trying to get away?
I can't answer that. I really don't know what his intent was, but I know he came out with 2 firearms.
For clarity, when he came out with the 2 guns, what was the AR and then the handgun?
Yes, ma'am.
But he only was using the AR?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's
he
correct.
had both.
Yes, ma'am.
If you would go into detail about the surveillance that was done on this location before you engaged the suspect, and also if you have any evidence to show that he may have been tipped off by someone that police were showing up, that he was ready to go at that moment.
So I won't go into details about how they conducted their investigation, but there was at least enough time for him to go upstairs and say, get up or get down. and gain access to an AR.
So you don't know if he was looking out the window? or
Right,
anything
right,
like that.
right.
How long, if you can at least give us this, what is the time frame of how long maybe surveillance had been done on that location to determine?
Once again, we won't go into details about how we conduct business.
I have a question
Yes,
about,
ma'am.
will there be any new safety procedures as of this incident? Also, were the U.S. Marshals and the correction officer or Officer Iyer wearing body armor?
Yeah, so my understanding is that all officers were wearing body armor. And then anytime we have a tragedy, I mean, we're always going to look at our tactics. We're always going to look at our equipment. We're always going to look to see if we can do something better. But at the end of the day, the results were only from the actions of the suspect.
In
Can you
terms
talk
of
about
that
what a
protection.
challenge these type of weapons present to officers? Because I assume that had it been something else, had it been a handgun, perhaps all these officers would have.
Potentially, yeah.
So the body
Potentially.
armor would have protected them better, or?
There's different levels of body armor. We talked about active shooter vest and stuff like that that are in our patrol cars. So, we do have equipment, but like I said, anytime we have a tragedy like this, or even something smaller where we don't have a tragedy, we're always looking for lessons learned. But at the end of the day, like I said, this was a shooter that was intent on trying to kill officers that day.
The day, one of the neighbors said that on the day of the of attempting to search a warrant, that the officer spoke to a megaphone and told Hughes to come out of the house. Do you think that approach should have been different? Do you think it would have resulted in something different? Do you think it would have been safe for the officers? Or?
No, I think it's a tactic that we use every day. It's called a surround and call out. And what we're doing is giving the suspect every opportunity to come out peacefully and, surrender to the officers that are there. So there's no doubt who we are, what we're there for. And like you said, he was on a megaphone, letting them know, hey, we're U.S. Marshals, we're here for such and such.
So they were on the microphone?
Yes, sir, that is correct. I can
like
confirm
the same
that.
protocol over maybe going up to the door and saying, we have a warrant, please turn around and,
That's correct.
That's, okay.
And that was before the shooting happened?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so that was done before the shooting happened, and then they approached the door, and then that's when everything...
No, they didn't approach the door. So what they did was basically a surround and call out. They held their positions. They let him know who they were, why they were there, giving him every opportunity to come out for a peaceful resolution.
They surrounded the house, you said, before the shooting started?
That's correct.
And do you know how long they were on the microphone for?
I don't have that specifics.
And I don't know if you're able to share any of this information. The two women that were in the home, did they further confirm that those two and him, the suspect, were the only people in the house?
Well, that's what they said, but SWAT went in and cleared the house before we turned it over to homicide and crime scene so they could start their investigation.
Do you know why the shot stopped? Because you said they started aiming at the window once they saw someone else was in there. What made them stop shooting and know that person was unarmed, the women that were in the house?
Like the whole goal with the suppressive fire was just to get the wounded out as well as the other officers that were trying to carry them out. So once they got them out, everything stopped.
Okay. Thank you so much, Deputy Chief.
Yes.
How are you folks
So-
doing, Chief?
If I can finish. So the Public Affairs Office will put out a press release shortly after this press briefing. Please understand that there's a lot of sensitive security, confidential information that's a part of an investigation. So that's including even with some of the public records requests that have been submitted, that there's going to be information that cannot be released because of the sensitive security information. Chief, do you want to answer that question about how officers are doing?
We have 12 on paid leave, is that correct?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Obviously, most tragic time in the history of our department, so it's going to take some time. Some are doing better than others, and some are, but the bottom line is we're continuing to do the work. We're continuing to keep our community safe, and that's all we can ask of them right now, as well as to ensure that they have the resources and utilizing those resources to make sure that they're okay in their mentally so that they can go out and do their jobs and recover. So thank you for that question.
Thank you, Chief.
And I ask you all, I'm going to reiterate one point that Deputy Chief Arrington made. Please continue to respect the investigation and respect those who are involved. We appreciate you respecting their privacy and not contacting the individuals who are directly involved with this case. Okay? Thank you all so much. Please submit your questions through Public Affairs if you have anything further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm still like getting my bearings around.
Oh, yeah, I totally get it. Okay, let us know if you need anything, okay?
I will, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
You too, you too. Jay, Mike, you guys good?
All right.